The growing popularity of the first Final Fantasy helped the originally unscheduled second installment arrive on Japanese store shelves 364 days later. Since Final Fantasy I was never intended to be a smash hit, its story didn't lend itself to a sequel. Because of this, Square felt the freedom to take numerous aspects of the first game in a completely new direction. Final Fantasy II was released in Japan on December 17, 1988. Sakaguchi, Amano, and Uematsu were back on board for the sequel, as well as several members from the original development team. The story began with 4 youngsters fleeing the forces of the Emperor of Palamecia, who had attacked their hometown of Fynn and killed their parents. While there was no prophecy that said they were destined to destroy evil and save their world, the heroes eventually became a humble warrior, a cautious mage, a simple-minded monk, and a morally conflicted Dark Knight. But unlike Final Fantasy I, there was no opportunity to upgrade these classes. For the first time, they were ingrained into their characters. They also didn't level up like their predecessors. Instead, the individual attributes of each character leveled up, including hit points, magic power, stamina, strength, spirit, agility, intelligence, and evasion. These categories would grow stronger the more they were used or needed, and the same was true for weapons and spells. Focusing on a character's melee or magical abilities would cause the opposite to be adversely affected, forcing players to choose one or the other. This new system was designed to create a more realistic progression formula based on cause and effect, and give the player more control over what piece of armor, type of weapon, or brand of magic they wanted to increase in power. However, it opened up several opportunities to cheat the system and build up your characters much faster than intended. When you canceled the command you previously assigned to one of your battling sprites, the performance enhancement would still be registered. And just because you got more hit points for getting hit by the enemy, that didn't mean that your own party members couldn't fulfill that role as well. Careful and patient players could level up their party significantly in just one battle, by attacking one another or reissuing multiple commands. The walls that blocked your party from the on-screen enemies came crumbling down to create a wide-open combat window with all the necessary information at the bottom. This housed current and max HP, which could now be raised well over 999 points. Final Fantasy II also fashioned a new style of questing and story progression, which involved memorizing key terms from NPC dialogues that would be brought up in later conversations. It was a process that involved lots of unpredictable inspection and time-consuming bouts of trial and error going through the conversation trees. Mechanical and heavily scripted as it may have been, this new way of playing introduced a higher degree of hands-on interactivity that allowed players to be socially immersed in the game's world. The fresh but flawed experience method and question-answer plot progression were just 2 of many additions to the sequel. While these didn't return in later games, the following developments became standards within the franchise. Final Fantasy II was the first time you could fight with less than 4 members in your party, and have characters come and go throughout the story, including the White Wizard Minwu, the passive General Gordon, the family man/pugilist Joseph, the spunky pirate Leela, and the wyvern-wielding Ricard, the Last Dragoon. Boat and airship rides began on a predetermined path, until you were able to control each craft by yourself, and you were no longer required to dock boats at harbors to reach the mainland. Added to the fleet in the second game was the Snowmobile, a 3-wheeled sailing vessel that allowed you to cross an epic mass of ice. If they were lucky enough, players could stumble upon a stable hidden in a forest, housing a familiar Final Fantasy staple, the Chocobo. It was Final Fantasy II that introduced the world to these beaked companions that helped players cross the continent faster with 0 enemy encounters. And you couldn't get in an airship in 2 until you met Cid for the first time. Players would bump into this pilot/scientist/engineer/explorer many times in the years to come, as his namesake continued throughout the main series and beyond. Cid taxied you around the map and eventually gave you his pride and joy to use at your leisure.